season replays, fantasy drafts, ultimate created leagues, and what if tournaments. It's Coffee Cup Games with the coach, DKM.
Hey, this is Coach DK. We just concluded our replay from the year 1900, and here are the final standings after the regular season. On the left-hand side, you'll see the standings from our replay. On the right-hand side, you'll see the original year 1900 records and where the teams finished. In the American League, we'll start there. You'll just notice that Chicago repeated, just like they had originally, as the American League champions. There isn't a lot of huge standouts. Minneapolis, Buffalo, Kansas City were the bottom three teams from the bottom up, as they were originally. You do see a little bit of movement. Cleveland probably is the biggest change, in my opinion. Cleveland were 19 and a half games out of first place originally. They had a losing record with the 63 and 73 record, winning only 46% of their games. In our replay, Cleveland won 55.6%, ended up only 3 games out. They got 90 wins and 72 losses. That's probably the biggest change, when I would say, from team. That might be good for Kansas City, who's going to end up playing them in the playoffs. Cleveland, didn't do as well originally, but they had a good replay. Milwaukee did drop several spots. They originally had come in second. They dropped down to fifth, but if you look at the record, they originally won 57.7. They, in our replay, won 53.1. They originally ended up 4 games out of first place. In our replay, they're only 7 games out of replay. So even though they dropped in spot, really, I would say Cleveland is really the biggest mover when it comes to how the teams did. In the National League, similarly to the American League, the team that originally won also won our replay. The Brooklyn Superbas had originally won in the year 1900. They did so in our replay. They won 99 games, couldn't quite make 100. You'll see that Boston, St. Louis had winning records. The bottom 5 teams had losing records. Originally, you'd see 3 teams had winning records, 5 teams had losing records. Probably some of the biggest differences. Pittsburgh struggled at the very beginning. They were only 4.5 games out of first place. They were 79 and 60. They really underperformed in the replay, going 79 and 83. They started off just horribly. They did come back middle of the season and make a run at it. So they improved drastically, but Pittsburgh was a big drop. Boston was probably the biggest improvement in the sense of just record. They were 66 and 72, had a losing record. St. Louis was 65 and 75. They had a losing record. Those 2 teams who originally had come in 4th and 5th were now 2nd and 3rd. So you had some movement there. So the playoffs in the National League might be very interesting. Cincinnati and New York were the last 2 teams originally. They were the last 2 teams in our replay. They were only a game and a half apart in the year 1900. In our replay, they were tied. But Philadelphia, you can see they were only 1 game above the bottom. They really did struggle. So you had a couple movements going on in that number 2 through 6 spot in the National League. But overall, really liked the results. Thought it was fun seeing teams move, a lot of similarities. But you always hope that the best teams are the best teams. And in our replay, that obviously was the case. We talked about the playoffs, so just take a quick look at the playoff picture before we jump into the season stats. In the American League, Chicago is going to be the number 1 seed. There we'll be taking on the number 8 seed, who is Minneapolis. I don't think Chicago's have any issues with that one. The real interesting one might be Detroit and Milwaukee. Detroit ended up getting the home field advantage on the last day of the season, which is making it hard for Milwaukee. But Milwaukee originally was the number 2 team in the year 1900. So if Milwaukee beats Detroit, you will have in the semis Milwaukee, the number 2 original team, going against Chicago, the number 1 original team. So Milwaukee could be a team to watch during the playoffs. Another interesting matchup is going to be the 3 versus 6 Cleveland Bays versus Kansas City Blues. Cleveland had a great replay. They went 90 and 72, but originally Cleveland was only a half a game above Kansas City in their standings. So the 3-6 game is probably going to be the one that I'm looking forward to watching the most. Indianapolis should have no problems with that one. So I really think Indianapolis will advance, Chicago will advance, but that 4-5-3-6 games could be very interesting. I think Indianapolis might have the easiest way to the American League Championship games, just if you base it off of the original year 1900. But Chicago, though they are the number 1 seed, is going against the number 2 and number 4 seeds originally. So they're going to have a little bit of a harder play to get to the championship than Indianapolis, in my opinion, but it'll be interesting to see. In the National League, the number 1 team, as I already mentioned, was Brooklyn. They're going to be taking on the Giants. That should be no problem for Brooklyn. A real interesting game here is Pittsburgh and Chicago. Pittsburgh struggled. They originally were the number 2 seed. So just like in the American League, if Pittsburgh wins, they were originally the number 2 team. They came in second place originally in the year 1900. So in the semis, you will have the original number 1 going against the original number 2 team in the semifinals. On the bottom half, you do have 3 versus 6. Interesting game here again. St. Louis was originally the 5th seed, came in 5th place, and Philadelphia originally had come in 3rd. So this again could be an upset. Philadelphia originally was the better team. They're going to be going against St. Louis. That is who knows. Boston is going to, in my opinion, have the easiest game going against Cincinnati, besides obviously Brooklyn against New York. But that semifinal to the bottom half is going to be very interesting. Boston was originally the 4th place team. Philadelphia was the 3rd, and St. Louis was the 5th. So who knows what's going to happen on the bottom half. You have Brooklyn and Pittsburgh, so it's going to be really interesting to see how the playoffs play out. All right, so now that we just went through the standings for the regular season and looked at the playoff picture, let's just go ahead and take a look at a few of the statistics throughout the year. And this is how things played out. You can see that the most productive team was Indianapolis of American League. They were plus 181. Followed not too far behind by the National League winners, Brooklyn. And then 2 other teams actually had a plus 100 when it came to run difference. The American League winner, Chicago Invaders, and then Cleveland, who ended up in 3rd place in the American League, also did well. So you see several teams from the American League. I think part of that might have to do with the fact that they probably also had some of the worst teams in Buffalo and Minneapolis. You'll see Minneapolis was negative 228, and you'll see that Buffalo was negative 148. They were by far the 2 worst. The other team that really struggled and was a negative over 100 was the New York Giants. But overall, that's kind of like where everything ended up playing out. Going beyond standings, let's look at some of the league leaders. Move this a little bit so that you guys can see a little bit easier. You'll see batting average. Elmer Flick from Philadelphia ended up reaching 400. He was actually hit 244 out of had 244 hits out of 610 at bat. So it comes to exactly 400 on the dot. So pretty interesting to see that first 400 hitter. Honus Wagner, Nap Lajoie, both were hitting 389. Jesse Burkett from St. Louis hit 383, and Willie Keeler hit 381. Those were the guys over the 380 marks. You see several players over 350. I actually expected to see more at the end of the year, of knowing that it was the year 1900, but it is what it is. So cool to see Elmer Flick with hitting 400. Runs scored. Elmer Flick also took the league title for that one. He had 149 runs, followed by his teammate Thomas, who had 148. Jesse Burkett had 146, and Ollie Pickering from Cleveland had 144. Honus Wagner led the league in doubles. Hickman from New York had 28 triples. So you do see Wagner, Green, and Ryan leading in doubles, and then you see Hickman, Hemphill, and Hartzell, Topsy Hartzell, having over 25 triples. Always fun to see how many home runs will end up getting hit in a year like 1900 when they are actually playing 162 games, and some guys who may not have played as much are getting more at bats. But Mike Donlin ended up taking the home run title. He had 24 home runs. He ended in a flurry at the end of the year. I think Elmer Flick going into September might have been leading the league with 18, and Donlin was behind him. So Donlin just went off toward the end of the season. I know he had like maybe 5 home runs in like 10 games, 11 games at one point. So he just went off at the end. But Elmer Flick had 21, so probably the best hitter. You see Long from Boston, Sullivan from Boston. They each had 17, the teammates from the Bean Eaters. And then Sox Seabold from Indianapolis had 15. Runs batted in was Jesse Burkett. He led the league with 138. Elmer Flick and Honus Wagner both had 130. Wee Willie Keeler had 119, and LaChance from Cleveland had 117. The leader in walks was Thomas, and then not surprising to me was Hamilton and McGraw. Both of them really, really good about getting on base. I actually thought I would see Cupid Childs in this. He tended to be a guy who got on base a lot, so I was a little bit shocked by that. And not a lot of guys who got struck out a lot. Ed Delahanty with 51, Gennins with 50, Van Holtren with 50. I mean, when you're talking about getting struck out and your league leader is 51, you see that there's not a lot of strikeouts going on in the league. But Ed Delahanty, the Hall of Famer, was the leader in being struck out. Not one who probably wants to be able to hang his hat on. Stolen bases, I was really curious how this would be, who would lead, how many it would be. Ollie Pickering from Cleveland had 74. Anderson from Milwaukee had 72. I forget Barrett's first name. From Cincinnati had 67, and Wee Willie Keeler had 65. And then Patton had 64. So you have 2 guys over 70, 3 guys over 60. I was kind of surprised not to see other guys like Honus Wagner up there. I thought I'd see guys, a little bit other guys that just from the names that I've known. So the fact that only Wee Willie Keeler and Ollie Pickering were the 2 that I had known previously. Dummy Hoy, he had 58, so I was aware of him. Obviously, we did a player profile on him at the beginning of the season, but was curious about how many steals they would do, considering it was a high year 1900, the early parts of baseball. A lot of stolen bases occurred. Hitting streak, the longest hitting streak for the league was Van Holtren, who had 25 from New York. You had 3 guys from Cleveland who went on long hitting streaks. Pickering had 24-game hitting streak. Gennins and LaChance each had 21. Billy Hamilton from Boston had 21. Honus Wagner had 21. Jesse Burkett had 21. But currently in our replays, the longest hit streak is Van Holtren with 25. Elmer Flick led the slugging percentage. He was the only player who had over 600. He hit 631. Followed behind by Wagner and Hickman and LaJoie. And then Topsy Hartzell, Joe Kelly hit 513, Jesse Burkett hit 503, and Buck Freeman hit 501. So a lot of famous names up there. Hickman's probably the only one that I was not as familiar with, but he seemed to do well. On-base percentage, you do see McGraw leading the on-base percentage with a 518. So he gets on base a ton. This doesn't surprise me. Elmer Flick, Honus Wagner, Jesse Burkett, Joe Kelly, Billy Hamilton, Matt LaJoie, Wee Keeler. So of those top, I guess it would be 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. 8 of the top 9 guys are all Hall of Famers when it comes to on-base percentage. The league leader in total bases was Honus Wagner. He was 387. I was a little bit surprised by that since Elmer Flick had the highest average and also was second in home runs. But Honus Wagner took the lead in total bases. Nobody got to 400. So it is what it is. Moving down now to the pitching. We see that Cy Young led the league with 31 wins. Nobody even really got close to him. Cy Young originally had a losing record in the year 1900, so that was a great reward for him. Several players over 20. We actually had 13 players over 20, or 12 players over 20 wins. So some guys who definitely got a lot of wins. Losses, Scott from Cincinnati had 25 losses. Again, not the award you want to be known for. ERA, Jack Toll had led the league pretty much from the beginning all season long when it came to ERA. He ended up with a 1.26 ERA, absolutely incredible. Denzer, his teammate in Chicago, had a 1.62 ERA. It tells you a lot about Chicago's pitching, and so why they ended up winning the American League. They were led by their pitching, obviously. Games started, a lot of guys did long hauls, pitched the majority of their games, obviously, with a replay like this and setting it up. Guys are going to get tired. We do turn that on. But Amoli from Buffalo led the league along with Lee from Kansas City, both with 47 starts. Carrick with New York, 46 starts. So you see a lot of teams at the bottom who had guys who were starting a lot. It just shows that they had to pitch a lot because they didn't have a lot of depth in their pitching. So interesting to see their complete games. Gear from Kansas City, Deneen from Boston, Pink Hawley from New York, and Cy Young all had 18 complete games. So that was pretty cool to see. Saves, did not expect to see anybody with any good numbers here, but it was cool to see Hal from Brooklyn getting 11 saves. That was pretty neat to see. The other one that I kind of look at is also strikeouts. So no 300 guys, no guys with 300 Ks in a season, for sure. Cy Young led the league with 126 strikeouts. Noodles Hahn came in second with 113. Jack Cronin from Detroit had 110, and Rube Waddell from Pittsburgh had 105. So only 4 guys with over 100 strikeouts. And that's pretty much everything that I wanted to show you from the league leaders. See if there's anything else I want to show. The only other thing I was going to talk about real quick was just the record. The longest game was 14 games. Most runs scored by one team was New York when they won 27-13 and they scored 27 runs. Yeah. Most hits was Milwaukee, got 32 hits in a game. Most runs combined was 40 when New York and Philadelphia played, the game which New York also got the most runs in a game by a single team. Most hits by both teams was Detroit and Kansas City on August 28th. They had a combined total of 49 hits. Most hits in the game, we had 5 guys who had 6 hits in a game. Most walks, several players with 4. Most strikeouts, Beaumont from Pittsburgh struck out 4 times in 5 at-bats in an extra inning game, so it sucks to be him. We did have several players with multi-home run games, which was kind of cool, including the no-hit king himself, Ted Breitenstein. The pitcher, who also plays on the field, he did have 2 home runs in a game, which was pretty cool to see. Sullivan from Boston did it twice in a matter of a week. He did it against St. Louis and then did it again against New York a few days later. Most RBIs, Sullivan had 7 in a game on 8/21, and Hugh Duffy, Hall of Famer, also from Boston, had 7 on August 31st. And most stolen bases in a game was Topsy Hartzell. He had 5 in a game. And probably the biggest one I always enjoy seeing was the replay the end of the game that we had done in one of our replays. Ted Breitenstein ends up getting a no-hitter on the last day of the season for Cincinnati to clinch the number 7 spot. Couldn't have pulled it at a better time. Strikeouts, Noodles Hahn had 9 on July 15th in 8 1/3 innings. He's the only one that I see that pitched almost a complete game, and got more strikeouts than innings pitched, or the same as, I should say. So Noodles Hahn shows why he was one of the best ones out there. According to the league, and we'll go American League first. So the MVP award goes to Ollie Pickering. He was 379 votes. Sox Seabold of Indianapolis was 375. LaChance was 209. But Ollie Pickering was the best got the MVP award. Jack Cotole, unsurprising, with a 1.26 ERA, pretty much took away the Cy Young award. You can see the All-Star selections. Powers, LaChance, Magoon, Sullivan, Schugart, Hartzell, Pickering, Hemphill, all are the top positional players. And then you got Cotole and Patterson, both the two top pitchers for Cleveland, or excuse me, for Chicago. And then you got Gear and Hart also getting a lot of votes, and Reedy also got some votes. So those are the top three pitchers. Golden Gloves, you can see Silver Slugger, you can see the Rolaids man. Rubedahl gets the Rolaids Fireman Relief Reward. Manager of the Year is Dick Patton of Chicago. In the National League, Honus Wagner ends up getting the MVP over Elmer Flick by one vote. A little bit surprised to see that. I thought for sure Elmer Flick would get that one, as he led in the average, but Wagner was second. Flick was second in home runs, but overall it goes to Honus Wagner, which is interesting because Elmer Flick actually got more All-Star votes than Honus Wagner for the right field starter. The award for the Cy Young Award goes to Cy Young, so he gets his own award, which is pretty cool. The All-Star selection, you'll see a lot of famous names here, especially on even the second side. You'll see some famous names. You got Chief Zimmer, Jack Beckley, Nap Lajoie, Jimmy Collins, Bill Dolan, Jesse Burkett, George Van Haltren, Elmer Flick. You still see guys like Honus Wagner, Kip Selbach, Ed Delahanty. The guy you don't see on this list, ironically, because of position, is Keeler. He would be on it just because of positioning. He got overdone. You notice he is fourth on the MVP award, but doesn't make the All-Star selection when it does it this way. We are not going to use that for the All-Star selection when we do it. You can see Golden Glove winners. You can see Silver Slugger, and you can see that Howell got the Rolaids Fireman Relief Award. Ned Hanlon from Brooklyn got the Manager of the Year. So that's pretty much the key things we wanted to showcase for the end of the season. And next episode, we're going to be jumping into the playoffs. So until next time, this is Coach Dan. Have a good one.